Humans find out about the world around them through the use of 5 senses. These are the senses of touch, taste, sight, hearing, and smell. Like other members of the animal kingdom, we need the information from our senses to help us determine what is going on around us. All animals use senses, but not necessarily the same ones upon which we rely. For instance, most birds have excellent eyesight, but cannot smell well, so they use their sense of sight to find food and to spot danger. A falcon who hunts other animals for food can see a pigeon as far as 5 miles away. Many insects have excellent senses of smell. A bee can smell flowers when they are still far away. Animals that hunt at night often have large eyes that help them see in low light. A bat can fly in complete darkness to find food and avoid hitting things by using its keen sense of hearing. The bat sends out a high-pitched sound that hits an object and then travels back to the bat's ears. The bat can tell how far objects are from him and what those objects are. Scientists have conducted experiments in which bats fly through mazes in complete darkness and never once strike anything. We need our senses for everything we do. Our senses of taste and smell help us decide if food is fresh and safe to eat. Our sense of touch can warn us about things that are sharp, hot, or painful. Our sense of hearing lets us know when to get out of the way. The sense that we rely on for the greatest amount of information is our sense of sight. Our senses send messages to our brain where decisions are made, and then responses are sent back to muscles throughout the body. It is like a giant communications network. Instead of phone lines, the body's nervous system is made up of thousands of nerves that run to every part of the body. The brain is the main control center. Everything we do is controlled by the brain. Some things are automatic, such as breathing or the beating of our hearts. Yet those functions are still controlled by the brain. The brain is made up of about 11 billion cells. Scientists have found that different parts of the brain are responsible for using different signals and then deciding what to do. As you can see in this computer-generated art, there are special centers for sight, touch, smell, taste, and hearing. The brain is extremely important to us and is therefore protected by a strong outer covering of bone called the skull. The brain is connected to the spinal cord, which is a thick bundle of nerves and nerve fibers that travel out to the rest of our body. The spinal cord is the main path for signals from the sensory nerves. The spinal cord runs down the bony rings of the backbone or spinal column. The spinal cord is protected by these bones. The nerves run out from the spinal cord and travel to all parts of the body. At the end of nerves are receptors, called sensory receptors. They pick up a sensation such as heat, cold, pressure, or pain, to name a few. Then a chemical change in the receptor causes a small electrical charge to travel through this nervous system network to the brain. The brain takes in the information and makes sense of it. Then it decides what should be done and sends another electrical charge back through the system to direct muscles to a response. Muscles around the mouth may be instructed to smile as we see someone we know, or to laugh when we hear a joke. The nerves that carry the instructions to muscles are called motor nerves. So the entire nervous system works because of a small amount of electricity produced by chemical reactions within our bodies. All of this happens very quickly. As mentioned before, our sense of sight provides us with the greatest amount of information. Our eyes are very complicated organs. Here are the major parts of the eye. The colored part of the eye is called the iris. In the center of the iris is a black hole called the pupil. Light comes into the eye through this hole. The opening of the pupil can be made larger or smaller by the iris. The iris is made of muscle fiber that can lengthen or shorten to control the size of the pupil and thus determine how much light gets in the eye. If we're in bright light, the pupil is smaller than if we're in darker conditions. The cornea is a clear layer of protection that covers the pupil and iris. Behind the iris is a lens that helps to focus the light onto the retina at the back of the eye. The retina is a special area made up of sensory cells called cones and rods. There are about 6 million cones that help us see in bright light. Cones also help us to see colors. There are about 120 million rods in the retina that help us to see in low light. They also see black and white. People living thousands of years ago actually thought that eyes sent out a ray of light that struck an object and then came back to the eye with an image of the object. They thought this way because they saw how a cat's or dog's eyes seemed to glow when they were in dark areas. Today we know that light strikes an object and is then reflected or bounces off that object and into our eyes. As it goes through the pupil and lens, it forms an upside-down image on the retina. The cones and rods that are struck by this light send messages to the brain, where the brain figures out what we're looking at. The brain also flips the image over so that it is right side up. Some people see things out of focus or in a blurred fashion. This can happen if the lens doesn't focus the light onto the retina correctly. People can be nearsighted or farsighted. If they are nearsighted, their eyeballs are longer than normal, and they can't focus on objects that are far away. Farsighted people have eyeballs that are shorter than normal, and therefore they can't see close objects clearly. Glasses or contact lenses can be used to correct these problems. The man-made lenses can be used to help the lens of the eye focus the light properly on the retina of the eye. Some people are colorblind. This happens when certain cones don't work right. People with color blindness can't tell the difference between colors like red and green. This problem occurs more often in men than in women. Hearing is another important sense that can supply us with a great deal of information. Sounds travel through the air in waves or as vibrations. The outer ear directs the sound waves into the ear canal, where the sound strikes the eardrum. The eardrum is a thin skin that vibrates with the movement of the sound waves. Behind the eardrum are 3 small bones called the hammer, anvil, and the stirrup. These 3 bones pick up the vibrations from the eardrum and carry them to the inner ear. In the inner ear, there is a coiled tube called the cochlea. It is filled with fluid. Vibrations from the stirrup cause the fluid to move. Hairs inside the cochlea respond to this movement. These tiny hairs are attached to sensory cells that send a signal to the brain. The brain can then determine what the sound is that we're hearing. Many people begin to lose their hearing as they grow older because the hairs in the cochlea begin to die. Our sense of hearing is capable of picking up sounds that range from 20 to 20,000 vibrations per second. That may seem incredible, but compared to some other animals, we have limited hearing ability. For instance, a dog can hear from 15 to 50,000 vibrations per second. This means that a dog can hear sounds way above our range. We call these sounds ultrasonic, which means they are beyond our hearing range. That's why a dog will often act funny if it hears something that we don't hear. Well, it can hear sounds that we can't hear, so its unusual behavior is in response to something that we're not aware of. Bats and dolphins send out ultrasonic sounds that bounce off of things and come back to their ears. They can then tell what is around them, even in complete darkness. The bat can hear sounds from 1,100 to 120,000 vibrations per second. Dolphins can hear sounds from 150 to 150,000 vibrations per second. Our sense of taste is obviously important to our enjoyment of food. But taste is also important in that it can help us decide whether something is bad to eat. Spoiled meat and other foods taste terrible, so we would not eat them, and thus avoid sickness or even death. Poisons often taste bitter, which could be a warning not to eat certain plants because of bad taste. Our tongues are covered with little bumps. On these bumps are the taste buds, which are the sensory cells for taste. Adults have about 9,000 taste buds. When we eat something, it is chewed into small pieces that are then mixed with a liquid called saliva. This mixture goes over the tiny hairs of the taste buds, and signals are sent to the brain. There are 4 types of taste buds, and they are found on 4 different parts of the tongue. Bitter tastes are picked up by sensors at the back of the tongue. Sour tastes are sensed on the 2 outer sides of the tongue. Sweetness is detected in the front and center regions, and salty tastes are sensed on the front tip of the tongue. Our sense of smell actually helps us to identify what we're tasting. The senses of taste and smell work together to help identify flavors. That's why when we have colds and our noses are stuffed up, our sense of taste suffers. We can't identify flavors as well, and we probably don't enjoy the food as much. The food would seem to taste differently because our sense of smell isn't helping to identify the flavor. In the nasal cavity of our noses, there are fine hairs that pick up smells. These hairs send signals to the brain. There are about 10,000 different smells or odors in the world. Like the sense of taste, the sense of smell can help us avoid bad food. Food that is not good to eat or that has spoiled smells bad, so we would know not to eat it. Animals rely heavily on their sense of smell for finding each other or for locating food. The sense of touch is also important in some very special ways. The sense of touch can tell us how things feel. Are they smooth or rough, cold or warm, slippery or wet, soft or hard? The skin is made up of many layers. The outer layers are called the epidermis. The cells on the top layers of the epidermis are dead and are constantly falling off. Under the epidermis is the dermis layer. It is here that the touch receptors are found. On some parts of the body, there are as many as 1,000 receptors per square inch. There are different kinds of sensors. Some detect cold, some respond to heat, some feel pressure, and others feel pain. It is the pain sensors that are probably the most important. They can warn us that something is hurting our bodies, and the brain can then decide how to respond. The sense receptors for touch are found everywhere in the body except the brain. You can sense when your stomach hurts, when pain receptors send messages to your brain. Then you can decide what to do to stop the pain. People who are blind rely heavily on the sense of touch. There is even a writing method that uses raised dots. A blind person who knows this system, called Braille, can touch the raised dots and read the message. Maybe you've seen Braille used on elevators or on offices at a business to help people identify where they are. People need their five senses for survival and to interact with the world around them. People should do everything they can to protect their senses. That means wearing helmets when biking or rollerblading, and wearing protective goggles when working around saws or when doing science experiments. People who work around noisy equipment should always protect their ears. All of these precautions can help to protect your valuable senses. Don't take them for granted, because it is the senses that help us to work and play in our busy worlds. Here are some questions about the program you've just watched. Write the answers on a sheet of paper or use the viewer's answer sheet, which is supplied with the video program. Question 1. What are the five senses? Question 2. What is the main control center of the body? A. Spinal cord. B. Brain. C. Heart. D. Lungs. Question 3. The main path for signals from the sensory nerves to the brain is the A. Spinal cord. B. Brain. C. Sensory receptors. D. Heart. Question 4. Most of the information collected by the sense organs comes to the brain through the sense of A. Smell. B. Touch. C. Sight. D. Sound. Question 5. Two senses work together to help us enjoy food. What are they? The back of the eye is covered with sensory organs called rods and cones. What is this part of the eye called? A. Cornea. B. Iris. C. Retina. D. Pupil. Question 7. What is the range of vibrations per second that humans are capable of hearing? A. 10 to 1,000. B. 20 to 20,000. C. 15 to 50,000. D. 30
to 100,000. Question 8. Some sounds are referred to as ultrasonic. What does that mean? Question 9. Dolphins can hear sounds from 150 to 150,000 vibrations per second. Why do they need such a range of hearing ability? Question 10. What are the 4 types of taste?